Hey YouTube, thought I'd give you a look at my movie collection today. It's mostly horror, but there are a few other things in there, but it's mainly a horror movie collection. On each shelf I've got figures from some of my favourite horror movies. On the top here I've got Jigsaw from the Saw series, Ghostface from Scream, and Norman Bates from Psycho. Now if we start this end, I've got The Mummy 1 and 2, even though I only really like the first film, to be honest. The sequels are just too much of the same, but with more effects. And I hate sequels that are like that, where it's just the same thing repeated over and over again. And it's kind of a problem I have with the Jurassic Park sequels as well. I absolutely love the first film, and I get some enjoyment out of all the sequels, but for the most part they are just rehashing what we saw in the first film. The series hasn't really evolved very much in 20 odd years. Here I've got Tremors 1 through 3. I know there are two more, but I don't think they were very good. But I love the first three, mainly for the character of Burt Gummer. Got Jaws here, Deliverance, Black Christmas and the remake Black Xmas, which I watch every December. Mars Attacks, War of the Worlds, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is a fantastic, the 70s version is a fantastic film. I really love that horror movie. It's one case of a remake being better than the original, though I do still really enjoy the 50s version as well. And in this DVD here I have the 50s version and the 70s version together. Much like with The Thing here, I've got the original Thing from Another World, which is fun enough. I enjoy it for what it is, but really John Carpenter's The Thing is where it's at. That's a brilliant horror movie. It's a shame they wasted the potential of that. A couple of years ago they made a sequel, prequel, remake, and they just repeated the same thing over again. It was a complete waste and nobody watched it, nobody really liked it all that much, and now it's been forgotten about. And it just seemed like such a waste to me when there's so much potential there and they didn't have the creativity or the courage to do anything different with it. The Fog, I mean here we're going into my John Carpenter films now. I'm not actually that keen on The Fog though, to be honest. It's a good premise, but there's just something that falls flat in it for me. I don't know if it's because I don't overly like any of the characters that much or what. Prince of Darkness, which is a great film. I love that. It's a really underrated horror movie. It's got one of the best depictions of hell I've ever seen in a film. Fire and Brimstone doesn't really do much for me. It doesn't particularly scare me or anything. I like the heat. I like the warm weather. But Prince of Darkness, in there, hell is like being underwater, but it's black. This black, suffocating water all around you, and there's sort of demonic hands reaching through the darkness at you. To me, that's hell. That's scary. They Live with Keith David, that's it, who was in The Thing, who, for me, actually, is best known for voicing Goliath in Gargoyles and Spawn in Spawn. And he does a fantastic job. He's got such a great voice. I'd love to have his voice. Big Trouble in Little China, it's a good fun film. Christine, we've got John Carpenter and Stephen King working together here. And that brings me on to my Stephen King films. But Christine, it's got that real Carpenter atmosphere, the music that I love. Or 80s Carpenter anyway. Then we've got Pet Sematary, which is my favourite Stephen King adaptation. The Stand, which I really enjoy for the most part, but I think the end falls flat. Apparently they're remaking it, so I think they could actually do something better with that, even though I do really enjoy it for the most part. That last episode, there are 4 episodes, it's like a mini-series. That last one just never really worked for me. Didn't have the payoff that I felt it was building up to. The Shining, of course, Green Mile and Shawshank Redemption, both Stephen King adaptations of his novels. A lot of people don't sort of realise that. This Mist, yet again another Stephen King one. The ending's a real kick in the balls, but I kind of like films like that every now and then. Them, which is a French horror movie, which I stumbled upon when I was browsing through the channels a few years ago. And because I've seen so many horror movies, I'm kind of desensitised to them. But watching that, it was the first horror movie in years that had me on the edge of my seat. It just, for whatever reason, it really grabbed me. So I do really enjoy that film and recommend it. I Am Legend, kind of a vampire zombie movie. It's good fun with Will Smith. Cloverfield. I have a soft spot for found footage, so seeing a kind of Godzilla type found footage movie really appealed to me. And then Virus, which a lot of people don't like for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's got some likeable characters. It's fun. got some good action, some good practical special effects. I've never really understood why that film gets so much hate. Now moving down to my second shelf, you can see I've got what I consider to be the real icons of modern horror, or of 80s horror at least. You've got Michael Myers, Leatherface, Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger, all from the NECA toy line. Now first up here we've got the Wicker Man, which I'm actually not that keen on anymore. I was a big fan of it sort of 10 years or so ago. Frankenstein and the Bride of Frankenstein. I'd like to get more of those old Universal horror movies. I used to have a lot of them on VHS, but since converting my collection to DVD, the only one I've got is Frankenstein and its sequel. Got The Dead of Night, which is a UK horror series. There are only 3 episodes that have managed to make it to DVD, and I haven't actually watched 2 of them, but I basically got this for the one called The Exorcism, which is set at Christmas, and I remember seeing it Christmas 2007 on TV and really enjoying it, so that's become part of my kind of December tradition now to watch that. The Exorcist, obviously a classic. Now, I'm not religious at all, but for some reason films about demonic possession scare me and creep me out more than films about serial killers or monsters or whatever, and I'm not sure why that is. I guess if it's a physical being attacking you, be it a serial killer or a monster or whatever, you can fight back against it. Maybe there's just something I find scary about a demon possessing you. Like, how do you fight back against that? And all the implications as well of, you know, if there are demons, then there's the devil and hell and everything. But for some reason that just kind of creeps me out. Next up after that is Ghostwatch. Now Ghostwatch came on one Halloween night when I was a kid, and it kind of presents itself as being a real life documentary, kind of like these Most Haunted type things where you get, you know, the presenters walking around investigating haunted areas. They kind of marketed it and presented it as if it was real, and Parkinson was presenting it, which I think gave it even more legitimacy. And you could tell it was based on the Enfield haunting, and they were investigating this house in London, and all these strange things were going on. And it was really fun how there'd be a shot in the house where they'd be talking to the family, and in the background you would see like a shadowy figure in the darkness. And then they'd go back to the studio and they'd be talking about it, and they'd have someone phone in saying, "Oh, I'm sure I saw something in that shot earlier on. There was a figure in the darkness." And they'd go back to the shot and there'd be no one there, and they sort of played tricks like that. And as the show went on, it became more and more kind of ludicrous, and you realised that it was fake, but it was still really good fun. And it was kind of in the same vein of the old War of the Worlds broadcast, where it fooled a lot of people, and a lot of people didn't like that because it made them look like idiots. And there were so many complaints, and there were parents saying that their child was having nightmares and crying, and I think someone even killed themselves and that was blamed on it. It was absolutely ridiculous, but there was a real kind of scare about it at the time. But I absolutely loved it, even though I was only a little kid at the time. I thought it was brilliant, and I couldn't wait to get that on DVD as soon as I could. And that's something that's on my Halloween rotation every year to watch that now. And I think that may be why I have such a fondness for found footage, leading us on to Blair Witch Project, the sequel of which is coming out soon, which I'm looking forward to. A decent sequel, hopefully, this time, unlike that Book of Shadows, which I don't even know what the hell the Book of Shadows was. It was never referenced or shown in the film whatsoever. But hopefully this will be a proper sequel to the Blair Witch Project. I got really caught up in this when it came out. I loved it, even though I knew it wasn't real, because I've seen behind the scenes stuff and interviews. I think most people I think realised it wasn't real, but you just kind of pretended that you did think it was real just so you could get caught up in it all, in the excitement of it and the fear. So that's kind of set me off with I'm an easy lay basically when it comes to found footage horror movies, even though I can completely understand why a lot of people don't like them, and there have been some really terrible ones, because being found footage, pretty much anyone can take a camera out and make one, and that has led to a lot of junk being spewed out. Scream, which is one of the few decent horror movies of the 90s. Saw, I really like the first Saw, but the sequels aren't bad, and I kind of like the continuity they weave together, but they don't really appeal to me. I'm not really that much into the torture porn type horror. Wolf Creek, which is a great Australian horror movie, kind of like The Hills Have Eyes or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but in Australia. The sequel's not so good. The first film, one of the things that draws me into it is it makes you kind of like the characters that you're following around who are going to be the victims, whereas in the sequel it is all about the murderer really, and it has a very strange abrupt ending. It just almost like they didn't really know what to do when they made the sequel. But there was a miniseries that came out this year, a 6-episode miniseries, which was actually really good, and I got really into. I ended up watching all 6 episodes over the space of about 2 days. I got so into it. Then we've got the Psycho movies, 1 through 4. The fourth one's really boring, like it's really boring. I only bought it on VHS back in the day because I wanted to have the whole series, but I was so disappointed in it after really enjoying 2 and 3. And I think a lot of people dismiss 2 and 3 because the first one's such a classic, but Psycho 2 and 3 are actually really good films. Psycho 3 starts to go more into just 80s slasher territory, but you know, I like 80s slasher films, so it didn't particularly bother me. Then Texas Chainsaw Massacre. My favourite ones in the series are the original, the 2003 remake, and Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3, which a lot of people don't like, but I find it really fun, especially because of the character Benny who's in it. It's nice to see a male protagonist who's actually capable in these sorts of horror films, because normally it's, you know, the guys are just drunken idiots who want to party, dude, and end up getting killed and dispatched pretty easily, and it's, you know, the sole surviving female. But in Leatherface, we get this survivalist character played by Ken Foree from Dawn of the Dead, who's a really cool character. And I kind of wish he had been the sole survivor and they'd had the girl get killed, so it plays with your expectations a bit more. We've also got Texas Chainsaw Massacre The Beginning on here, just because it's part of the box set, but I'm not all that keen on that one. It just sort of rehashes the 2003 one in an inferior way. Now, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is my favourite slasher series, but actually as a series it is kind of a mess. I mean, the second one was just bug nuts crazy, and I do kind of like the second one, just for how silly it is, and it's also got one of the best jump scares I've ever experienced in a horror movie. That's one thing I'll say about Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 2, there's a fantastic jump scare in it. But it doesn't really feel like the first movie, it feels like a parody of it. Then the third film I like, but even that has a few minor references to the second film. It pretty much feels like a remake. And then the fourth Texas Chainsaw Massacre film feels like another remake, and it has absolutely no reference to anything before, and is a complete terrible movie. The Next Generation, or whatever it's called, absolutely terrible. Then we got the movie that was really marketed as a remake, even though I'd argue it's sort of the third remake in the series. Then we got the prequel to that. Then we got a sequel to the original movie, which ignored all the original sequels. And now we're getting a prequel to the original movie. But the prequel to the original movie is going to be called Leatherface. Now, we already have a prequel movie, even though it was a prequel to the remake. And we already have a film called Leatherface. So releasing another film called Leatherface, which is a prequel, it's just really confusing things. Now, after that, we've got the Halloween series. For me, it's only really the first 4 films that I enjoy, and I watch every Halloween. The first one, obviously, is really good. It's a classic. The second one, I love the beginning. I love seeing the aftermath of the original movie and Donald Pleasance, running around, just panicking and going crazy. He shot him 6 times! 6 times! He's not human! You don't know what death is. I mean, I love his performance. That's why I love Halloween 4 as well, for Donald Pleasance. And the end is really good as well. You see Donald and Michael face off. It's time, Michael. But in between, there are some really drawn-out, boring scenes at the hospital. And I feel like Halloween 2 should have just been... Make Halloween a 3-hour movie and add the beginning and the end of Halloween 2 to the end of Halloween, and just have it be, you know, this sort of 3-hour horror movie, and cut out all the filler in Halloween 2. Halloween 3 has nothing to do with Michael Myers, as I'm sure everyone knows, but I still find it a really good Halloween movie. I just think it's kind of fun in its craziness, and it's got that Carpenter atmosphere that I like as well, with the music and everything. And then Halloween 4, of course. It's not necessarily anything special, but I just think it's a good 80s slasher film. And the Halloween series, it's kind of all over the place. It's like they don't really know how to sustain it, you know. After Halloween 1 and 2, they lost it with Halloween 3, which a lot of people didn't like because it didn't have Michael Myers in. Then they released Halloween 4, which was really popular. Then they pretty much completely threw that out the window with Halloween 5 and 6, which were terrible. 5 especially was just so bizarre. Like, it had this really annoying main character called Tina, I think, who was this shrieking idiot who wanted to die, and you had these bumbling cops that had this kind of comedy music come on every time they were there. It's this really odd, strange tone to the film, I guess because they rushed it out, and then by the sixth one they just didn't, run out of ideas. But then they brought it back again with H2O, which I actually am not that keen on. I liked it at the time when it came out, it seemed really good, but upon rewatching it a year or two back, I actually didn't think it was anything special. It's alright, but I didn't like it enough that I'd want to add it to my collection or really watch it again. But that was quite a popular movie when it came out. Then they completely pissed that away instantly with Halloween Resurrection, which was terrible. Then they regained popularity again with the remake, and then they instantly flushed that down the toilet with H2, which most people find absolutely terrible, including myself. So every time they rescue the series, they then instantly throw it all away again. They just don't seem to really know what to do with it. Now I've got the first Friday the 13th, the second and the fourth, which are my two favourites. The third one I'm really not that keen on, so I was happy enough skipping that, even though it is the one where he gets his iconic mask. I've got Jason Lives, which is, I find kind of a fun one, and then Jason Goes to Hell, which, even though it's really doesn't feel like a Friday the 13th movie, it's just so bug nuts crazy, I do kind of find it fun. And also it's got the scene right at the end, which got me so excited as a kid when I saw it, along with the scene in Predator 2 that got me hyped up for these epic versus movies that I hoped would one day get and had to wait about 10 years for. Then I move on to Nightmare on Elm Street. That's probably my least favourite of the slasher series. I feel like really 1, 3 and Freddy vs Jason are the only ones worth watching. I think they kind of give a complete story arc that feels like a trilogy, and you don't really need the other films that are in between. You get the Nancy story finished, you get the introduction to the sanitarium and the kids being given drugs to suppress their dreams and all that, and then it accumulates in Freddy vs Jason, which I think is actually one of the best films in both series. And then lastly I've got Hellraiser here. Hellraiser, poor old Hellraiser, like the first film is so good, and the second film's quite good as well, but I'm not so bothered about it, but it just really goes off the rails. Like, the sequels are just awful. It's such a shame. It's like no one seems to know really what to do with that franchise, and it just descended into cheap old TV movies that get Pinhead tacked onto the end to try and trick you into thinking it's a legitimate Hellraiser film. Now down to the third shelf along. Now here I've got a werewolf from Dog Soldiers, because I love werewolf films, and Dog Soldiers especially. The Crypt Keeper, because I love EC. And Ash from Evil Dead. Groovy. Now to start off with, I've got some of my favourite zombie movies. I've got Resident Evil Apocalypse, which is kind of a guilty pleasure. I'm not particularly keen on the Resident Evil films, but that one I do really enjoy. It's just quite a fun, dumb zombie movie, and I really fancy Jill in it. Night of the Living Dead, which is one of my favourite films, definitely my favourite zombie movie. Absolutely love that film. I actually saw it originally by accident, because Invasion of the Body Snatchers was on TV, but I was out at a party, so I got my dad to record it for me. And then the next day, when I was sort of hungover in bed, I watched it. But after Invasion of the Body Snatchers, it was on as a double bill with Night of the Living Dead. So Dad left the video recording and recorded Night of the Living Dead, which I actually had no interest in watching. But I thought, seeing as I've got it here, I might as well, got nothing better to do. And I just fell in love with it. I just love the tone of it, the atmosphere, the music, the characters. Even though the characters are quite, some of the characters are relatively bland and generic, the female characters especially, I suppose. There's just sort of something that really drags me into that film. And once again, it's got a found footage vibe to it to me, because it's so grainy that just makes me feel like this could be real almost. Anyway, then I've got Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead, which progressively get worse, I think. A lot of people like Dawn more than Night, but I don't like it as much as Night. I do still really enjoy it though. Dead's got some amazing special effects, like the scene where the guy's being ripped apart, and his guts are being ripped open, and then his head gets ripped off of his body, and as his neck stretches, his voice kind of goes, "Ah!" Oh, I just love those scenes. But there's no characters in that film to latch on to, though. Everyone's an arsehole. There's not a single character I like in that film. Then you've got the Night of the Living Dead remake, which I'm not really that keen on, but it was the first DVD I ever bought, so I'm kind of nostalgic about it. Dawn of the Dead remake, which I think is actually really fun. If I'm honest, I probably enjoy it. Like, the original Dawn of the Dead is a better film, but I think the remake is a more fun film. Like, I can just pop that in and watch it, just, you know, for fun, whereas that one I feel like I've got to commit to it more to sort of sit and watch it and enjoy it, really, if that makes sense. Anyway, then I'll move on to my DVDs. I'll just mention I've got Night of the Living Dead VHS up here just because I'm sentimental about it, because it's one of my favourite films and I really like this 25th anniversary VHS of it. Anyway, yeah, moving on to my werewolf films. I love werewolves. They're probably my favourite of the old Universal style monsters, you know, vampires, werewolves, mummies, Frankenstein's monster. But at the same time, there aren't that many werewolf films I actually think are that good. Like, to me, the top three are American Werewolf in London, Howling, and Dog Soldiers. Dog Soldiers and American Werewolf in London obviously appeal to me because they're set in England, and I'm living in England. But the Dog Soldiers as well is in this fantastic box set. I mean, this is just three great horror movies here. The Descent, Dog Soldiers, and 28 Days Later. It's just an awesome idea to put those three films in a box set together. For God's sake, don't watch The Descent Part 2 though, it's bloody awful. 28 Days Later obviously ties in with the zombie movies. I know a lot of people say they're not zombies, they're infected, but whatever, they're zombies. Got the Evil Dead trilogy, even though, to be honest, it's only really Evil Dead 2 I'm that bothered about. I don't think the first film really holds up that well, and the third film's just a bit too goofy for me. I thought Evil Dead 2 got the combination just right of horror and comedy and action. Then I move on to my EC films. Now, Beyond the Grave isn't based on an EC property, but it's made by Amicus, who made the EC movies in the 70s, and it's an anthology horror that I really enjoy, so I lump it in with them. Next to that, I've got Tales from the Crypt and the Vault of Horror, the 70s movies. Vault of Horror is not quite as good, but Tales from the Crypt I love. Then I've got the first 4 seasons of Tales from the Crypt TV series. It kind of went downhill after season 4, so I haven't bothered getting the rest of it. And I've got the first season of the animated series, Tales from the Crypt Keep Her. I did a video on Tales from the Crypt, I don't know, a year or so back, maybe 2 years ago, on all my EC books and comics and DVDs. Now on to the vampire films. Got Let the Right One In, which is an absolutely beautiful film. I love that film. It's not particularly scary or anything, but it's just it's like Twilight, but for adults. You know, it's like a mature version of Twilight, which is ironic, really, because it stars children. But, you know, if you want a more well-made, intelligent human falling in love with a vampire story, watch that. It's a Swedish film and it's subtitled, but this, to me, part of the atmosphere is that everyone's speaking in Swedish. I don't understand Swedish, but it's a beautiful language to listen to, and it really adds to the atmosphere of that film, just like Not the Living Dead being in black and white adds to the atmosphere, and you lose something to colorise it. I think Let the Right One In, the dubbed version, it just really loses something, and the same with the remake. And I know you get some people who are like, oh, I don't go to the cinema to read. Well, fuck off. I'm really snobby about people with that attitude, for Christ's sake. Like, does it really hurt you to read some subtitles? 30 Days a Night is a cool vampire film. In this day and age of Twilight glittery vampires, it was nice to have a more hardcore, old-style vampire film. Fright Night. I wish I had Fright Night 2 on DVD. Actually, a lot of people aren't so keen on that for some reason, but I think it's just as good as the original. I probably prefer Fright Night 2 more, to be honest, but it's really hard to get on DVD. I'd love to get Count Yorga on DVD as well, and A Return to Salem's Lot, but I don't think either have been released on DVD. Lost Boys, Dusk Till Dawn, Bleed 1 and 2. Now on the fourth shelf, we're moving a bit away from horror now. This is more kind of adult sci-fi with a horror element to it. As you see, I've got Robocop there, Zero Garner, the Terminator, and the space jockey from Alien. Now up here I've got the Robocop Trilogy, Robocop the TV series, and Prime Directives, God help me. Now, really, like, Robocop, it's only really good in the original film. Like, beyond that first film, it really goes downhill. But I'm just a bit of a completist with Robocop for some reason, even though I acknowledge that most of it's not very good. I do enjoy all the Robocop films, though. The second one, I think, would have worked better as a TV series. Like, there are so many muddled ideas thrown into that film that aren't developed, you know. You could have had an episode based on Robocop stalking his wife, an episode based on Robocop being reprogrammed, an episode based on Robocop's war on drugs, an episode based on the police going on strike, an episode based on Kane becoming a cyborg, and then all running through the series have, you know, OCP as the bad guys, and then the finale is seeing OCP taken down or whatever. But it's just, you've got all these ideas thrown into this film that aren't really developed all that well and just kind of get discarded. Robocop 3, I completely understand everyone's problems with that film, that it's kiddified, you've got this annoying little kid sidekick, you've lost Peter Weller as Robocop, which really hurts the film, the violence is toned down. We see OCP fall, but it's not under the command of the old man. Instead, you've got Rip Torn in charge. Well, no one cares about Rip Torn, I'm afraid, in the Robocop films. We wanted to see the old man get his comeuppance. So there's so many unsatisfying, unfulfilling things in that film, but I do still just find it a fun, kind of dumb action film. Robocop the series, not really that good. I do kind of enjoy it, but it feels so different from the movies. It feels like an alternate world, you know, where Robocop was built in Canada, basically. Then the Prime Directors, which is just bloody awful. Like, it's a good 4 hours longer than it needs to be. I mean, altogether, like, there's 4 movies, TV movies, that are 2 hour each, and Jesus Christ, it drags. Then move on to Terminator. And the first 2 Terminator films is a toss-up for me which one I like best. The horror fan in me likes the first movie best because it's basically a slasher with a cyborg. But the second film is such a ride. It's just such an epic blockbuster movie that it's hard for me. It depends on the day of the week which one of those I like best. Terminator 3, it's just a pointless rehash of Terminator 2. The only thing I like about Terminator 3 is the ending. I think seeing the nukes go off and humanity fall it's really touching, a really emotional scene to see that happen. It's really done well, but it's, you know, leading up until that point, you've got 2 hours of watching an inferior rehash of Terminator 2, which just kind of feels redundant. Then up here I've got Terminator Salvation, which is actually my 3rd favourite Terminator film. And I think the future war, that's where the series needed to go. You know, how many times can we see a Terminator go back in time to defend Sarah Connor, a Terminator go time to kill John Connor? You know, that's done and dusted. That should have been left behind after Terminator 2. The future war is where the series needed to go if you're going to continue the series at all. Unfortunately, they completely wasted the concept by focusing on this pointless character. What the hell was his name? Marcus. I mean, who cares about Marcus? Like, we never heard about him before, we're never going to hear about him since. It's just, they completely wasted that concept, and now Hollywood are probably going to be scared to go back to it, and that's why we end up with Terminator Genesis, where it's once again, oh, Terminator's gone back in time to kill Sarah Connor, Terminator's gone time to protect Sarah Connor, blah blah blah, same old, same old. It's alright, moving on from that. The Predator Trilogy. I enjoy all 3 films. They have gradually gone down in quality. I didn't like the 3rd one at all when I first saw it. It just seemed like a boring rehash of the first movie, but I watched it again last year and I did actually enjoy it. I found it quite fun, but it's not as good as the first 2. I really like Terminator 2. Not Terminator 2, what am I talking about? Predator 2, sorry. I love the design of the Predator. I like Harrigan. You know, Danny Glover is such an interesting hero to have in that film. He's not your typical male lead, and I like that. I like that they didn't just try and have an Arnie clone in there. And I think that's why a lot of people don't like the film, because they just wanted to see Arnie in the jungle being hunted by a predator. But to me, that's, you know, we've seen that. Why would I want to see that again? To me, the Predator movies are about seeing the predator hunt different people each time. Not seeing a predator hunt Arnie again and again and again in the jungle again and again and again. Why do people want to see that? I've never understood people who want the sequel to just be a rehash of the first movie. You know, I want to see the world developed. I want to see the characters change and different things happening in that world. I don't want to see the same movie again and again. That's the problem with the Transformers movies, you know, we're 4 movies in with that series, and it's just the same story every time, and nothing's developed. So I like that they moved it to the city, they had a real different kind of hero, and it worked for me. Then we've got Alien vs Predator, which is a concept I think could work. I still believe that is a good idea for a movie. They just haven't carried it out very well. Now, a few positives I can say about Alien vs Predator is there are some cool shots in the first film. The scene of the aliens swarming over the Queen and kind of attacking her so that her blood will eat through the chains. There's a scene of the Queen running through like a corridor with all of her progeny following her, going along the walls and the ceiling. There's some cool scenes. The scene of the alien when it spears the Predator through the chest with its tail and it holds it up face to face. You know, there are some cool shots, but a few cool shots aren't enough to make a good film. And Alien Requiem, the only good thing about that really is the Predator. I love the Wolf Predator in that film. It's a really cool design. He's got some cool weapons. I'd love to see him return. I don't think it'll ever happen because I imagine Fox want to try and wipe Alien vs Predator Requiem from everyone's memory, but I would love to see a return of the Wolf Predator. After that we've got Prometheus, which I admire it for trying to bring some class back after Alien vs Predator and Resurrection. You know, like all hope had been sapped really from the Alien franchise, but Prometheus tries to bring it back, and it tries to be intelligent, but it just fails for me. There are so many ridiculous flaws in that film. I remember when I first saw it, I was so hyped to see it. And then after watching it and driving home from the cinema and thinking about the movie, I just started laughing to myself. Like, there were just so many mistakes in that film. You know, as much as it tries, it's written so poorly to me. I know a lot of people love the film, but it just doesn't work for me at all, I'm afraid. Then we get to the Alien Trilogy, which is probably my favourite trilogy of movies. Like, all 3 of them. I know a lot of people don't like Alien 3, but I think it's a fantastic ending to the trilogy, to the Ripley storyline. It's a toss-up for me. It's like with Terminator. It's a toss-up between the first and second, which one I like. The first because it's more of a horror movie. The second one because it's such a ride. But the third one's a good, you know, a close runner-up. I love how nihilistic it is. You know, as much as I liked Hicks in Aliens, he's not that interesting a character. I'm perfectly happy with him being killed off at the start of Alien 3. Newt purely existed to develop Ripley's character. Newt in herself, and I know a lot of people might hate me for saying this, but she's not an interesting character. You know, she spends the whole film going, Ripley, Ripley. You know, I don't miss her. I love the punch in the guts that Alien 3 gives me at the start of like, bang, nah, Newt and Hicks are dead. No happy ending for Ripley, no happy little surrogate family with her and Hicks getting married and adopting Newt, and Bishop can be the butler or whatever. Nope, all dead. And see, that's what the aliens are about. You know, the aliens are death and tragedy. Once you encounter them, they will haunt your life. You know, Ripley's life has been destroyed now. Everyone she gets close to dies. She will always be haunted by it, and that leads you to the ultimate ending where she has to kill herself to rid herself and the universe of the aliens and to end it for herself. The aliens lose their impact if you have people survive it too long. You know, Ripley had to die. She couldn't, you know, how many times can this one woman survive alien encounters before they start to lose any sense of threat? Because all the way through the trilogy, they're going, oh, we can't let the aliens get to Earth. It'll be a disaster if they get to Earth. Well, why? If one woman can continually keep defeating them, they're not going to have a chance against, you know, a planet of humans and, you know, multiple armies. So they needed to keep that sense of threat and show, as I say, show the tragedy that the aliens will forever ruin Ripley's life and leave her alone. And yeah, I can completely understand that Alien 3 is a slog of a movie for people to get through. It's so nihilistic. You know, the second you get close to a character, oh, they're dead. You know, Clements, he's the only real relatable character at the beginning who Ripley gets close to, and then bang, he's gone. The authority figure, you know, the Tetley T-Man, bang, he's gone. But I do like the characters in the third film, even though they can be a bit difficult to keep track of because they're all English people with skinheads. I like Clements, I like Dylan, I like Morse. So I'm a big defender of that film. There are two cuts. There's the theatrical cut and the extended cut. And most people prefer the extended cut, but I actually prefer the theatrical one because even though the extended cut is better in the middle because it shows you what happens to a lot of the characters, whereas in the theatrical cut, a lot of characters just kind of disappear and you're left to assume they died in the Inferno or whatever. But what spoils the extended cut for me is the beginning isn't as good and the ending is terrible. The beginning, like, dogs can be scary. Rottweilers can be vicious and scary. So an alien coming from a Rottweiler makes the alien seem more of a threat. An alien coming from a cow, it's just not. Cows aren't scary, right? So that doesn't work for me. And also, you know, we are, as a species, we get closer to dogs than we do to cows. Cows are a food source for us, dogs are pets. So it's more gut-wrenching to see the alien bursting from this poor dog that's writhing around on the floor crying than it is just seeing an alien pop out of a dead cow. You know, there's no impact in that. And the ending, oh my god. When Ripley sacrifices herself, she's falling into the lead works and the alien queen pops out of her and she grabs, and it's such an emotional moment. But in the extended cut, they do this awful slow-mo juddering effect as she's falling into the flames, doing a Christ pose, which is far too on the nose, and you don't see the queen pop out of her chest, and it's just awful. And I don't know why they restored that bit other than for the sake of it, but it just ruins the film for me. And to me, the beginning and the end of a movie are more important than the middle. So in an ideal world, I would create my own cut of the film with the original beginning and ending and the extended version's middle. If I can ever be bothered to do that, I might do it one day just for my own satisfaction. Now we've got Planet of the Apes. The original series is actually really good. I know it might look on the surface a bit goofy, but it's actually a really good series. The fifth one's not so good, but the first four hold up well. It's got the TV series, which starts off alright, but then about halfway through it really loses its way and seems to lose any sense of direction. The remake, the Tim Burton remake, which is alright, I don't hate it, but it's kind of superfluous. And then the new movies, which I love, especially Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, it was my favourite film of 2014, and there were a lot of films in 2014 I liked. I can't wait for the... I think the next one's going to be called War of the Planet of the Apes or something, but I can't wait for that. Hopefully that'll be out next year. Now the Star Wars films. I'm not a massive Star Wars fan, but basically I got hyped up for the new one, for Force Awakens, so I went back and bought a load of the old films. I didn't bother getting Phantom Menace because I just don't feel it's really necessary for the story, and it's my least favourite of the first 6 films. But I do like 2 and 3. They've definitely got their problems, mostly in the form of Hayden Christensen, but I don't think they're bad. They're not as good as the original trilogy, obviously. Now, I was actually really disappointed with Force Awakens. Like, I was watching it, and I quite quickly cottoned on that this is just A New Hope. This is just repeating A New Hope, almost beat for beat, scene for scene. But I thought, well, they'll do that to start off with, to ease us into it, and then all of a sudden it will take a turn, and it will do something really different and really shocking. But as the film went on, it dawned on me that they're not going to do that. They are just going to copy A New Hope beat for beat. And it got to the point where I was really bored watching it because I knew what was going to happen. Every single scene, you could tell exactly what was going to happen because it was exactly the same as A New Hope. And I was so disappointed with it. And I don't really understand why it's so popular. A lot of people are like, oh, this feels like a Star Wars film, finally. Well, yeah, it feels like a Star Wars film because it's a bloody rip-off of the original Star Wars film. And once again, it's back to this attitude a lot of people have that sequels have to be the same as the original. I prefer the prequels over Force Awakens because at least they were a bit different. They showed us a different part of the world of Star Wars, some different planets and the society and the capital planet of Coruscant and all that, rather than just ripping off A New Hope. Also, at the end of Return of the Jedi, you feel like, okay, things have changed now. The Empire has fallen. The rebels, I guess, are going to become the new world leaders, the new politicians. Luke's going to restore the Jedi Order. And I was really excited to see how that world had changed 30 years on. Actually, it hasn't changed at all. Like, in 30 years, nothing has changed. The Empire's still there, basically, even though they're called the New Order now. It's basically the Empire. The rebels are still living on forest moons for some reason, rebelling against things. The Jedi Order has not been restored. I mean, nothing's changed in 30 years. Like, the last film was called Return of the Jedi. Whether the Jedi have not returned in 30 years. So that was disappointing to me as well, because I wanted to see, you know, the prequel films feel like a different world because that was before the Empire. The original trilogy feel like a different world because that was during the Empire. I wanted to see the world without the Empire. I wanted to see how different this was as well. But no, they just had no guts. And I don't know, maybe after the disappointment a lot of people had with the prequels, they felt they had to do that. But I just found it kind of disappointing and bland. The Mad Max Trilogy, I really need to get the new one. It's a shame that Mel Gibson wasn't in it, but other than that, it is a really good film. And then Blade Runner here, finally. I'm a bit dubious about the idea of them making a sequel to that, especially after seeing Prometheus, but we'll see. Now on to the final shelf, which isn't really horror at all, so if you came here to watch a horror DVD collection, you might as well turn off now. But while I'm here, I thought I might as well show you the rest of my collection. Just get Darth out of the way there. Then I've got Watership Down. Now, I was never a Disney kid, you know. I liked action cartoons like He-Man and Transformers and stuff. The closest I got to a Disney film was Watership Down, where you got, you know, talking bunnies. But if you've seen that film, you know it is not a Disney film at all. Threads here, which I guess I would kind of class that as a horror film. It's about a nuclear attack on England in the 80s. My God. It's a slow build. It's kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre in the way that the characters are very kind of bland, really, and ordinary, but it actually works for the film if you can stick with it. You know, you have to get through the slow beginning, and in the background, you know, you've got these ordinary people that, you know, sort of thinking about having a baby and starting a family and all this mundane stuff. But in the background, you've got things on the news and on the radio about tensions between Russia and America and whatnot, and then when the attack comes, man, oh boy, gee whiz, it really hits you. It's probably the best depiction of a nuclear attack I've seen in a film, closely followed by Sarah Connor's dream sequence in Terminator 2. But it's, oh man, it's brutal. And from that point onwards, the film just does not let up, and it's quite a nihilistic film as well. There's no happy ending. The images that stuck with me during the nuclear attack in that film are, there's a quick scene of milk bottles melting. Now, it might not sound very interesting, but for some reason that imagery of just milk bottles melting in the flames, and then there's a scene of a cat kind of rolling around, dying, and for some reason it was just the small details like that stuck with me. And then got 1984, V for Vendetta, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Sorry, but Kevin Costner will always be Robin Hood to me. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Seven, Death Wish 2. Now into my sort of military films. Saving Private Ryan, Black Hawk Down, Missing in Action, the Rambo series, and G.I. Joe 1 and 2. Even though they're not particularly very good, I am sort of a fan of the G.I. Joe franchise, so I just got the movies for that, and if I'm really in the mood I can watch them, but they're not very good. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the first two films I really love. Third film's one of the worst films I've ever seen. TMNT is alright, but it just doesn't appeal to me. I don't know why. Same with the third film. I don't know why they didn't have established villains in them. You know, fair enough, move on from Shredder. We can't see Shredder in every single film. But, you know, have Krang or Baxter Stockman or the Triceratons or the Rat King or Lord Dreg. I mean, there's so many villains that they could use, but instead they make up these kind of boring monsters and Japanese samurai people from the past who no one cares about. No one wants to see that in a Turtles film. Toxic Avenger here. Now, I loved Toxic Crusaders as a kid. I used to watch it before school, and I had no idea that it was based on this R-rated sort of semi-horror movie from the 80s. So as soon as I found out, thanks to the internet and the early days of my internet usage, I got hold of that. The sequels are awful. I'm not particularly a fan of trauma movies. A lot of them are. The older ones aren't so bad, but it gradually got to the point where the intelligence, and believe it or not, the Toxic Avenger has got some intelligence to the way it's written in the comedy, but as the years went by, their films became more and more just kind of dumb, crazy, nonsensical nonsense. Toxic Avenger 2 and 3 are really boring. It's basically just Toxie walking around Japan for 2 hours, and then the fourth film is just nonsensical. Then I got the Toxic Crusaders movie, which is basically the first few episodes of the cartoon series. I'd like to get the complete series, actually. I'm not sure if they've ever released that or not. Now, Godzilla. I'll probably get some hate for this because I've discovered in the past that Godzilla fans are very passionate, but I really like the '98 Godzilla movie. I find it a fun movie. Yeah, the characters are dumb and annoying, but I love the action scenes between Godzilla and the military. And I like the design of the monster. And I'm perfectly happy accepting that is not Godzilla. I don't think of that as Godzilla. It's too far removed. That is Zilla. Okay, it's a separate monster that happens to exist in the same universe as Godzilla. But I am a fan of Zilla. And that's why I've got the animated series there as well. Then moving on from that, I mean, I would just say I like that film more than the 2014 Godzilla movie, which I found really boring. Now moving on to Ghostbusters 1 and 2, fantastic. A lot of people aren't so keen on 2, I don't really know why, I like it. The Real Ghostbusters, series 1 and 2, and then Extreme Ghostbusters, which is actually, I know a lot of people might think it's blasphemous because it hasn't got the original cast as the main characters, but it's actually a really good cartoon series. The animation's good, the stories are good. It's better than the last half of the Real Ghostbusters. You know, once they swapped out the voice cast and had Slimer become more of a main character, that series really went downhill. And Extreme Ghostbusters is more in the same league as the first couple of seasons of Real Ghostbusters in terms of quality. And there's just a quick shot of my Predator collection. That's on top of the DVD shelves. And there's my Alien collection now, which is actually on top of a few more DVDs. I won't go into too much detail about these ones because they're just superhero ones really. But in here, yeah, as you can see, this side I've got all the DC and Marvel movies that I like, and then in there I've got Transformers, Judge Dredd, the original and the Dredd one from a few years ago, both of which I actually enjoy. 300 Red Edition, Donnie Darko, Toy Story Trilogy, and the Time Forgot mini episode thing. Small Soldiers, Gremlins 1 and 2, Back to the Future Trilogy, and the Lord of the Rings Trilogy.